let's get right into those 5 tips. Number 1, let's make sure your emails get to the inbox. So if you have been on a session with me before or have seen me at a conference, first of all, welcome back. You know that I am a big proponent of deliverability. And here's the thing, if you aren't actually getting into the inbox, then all of these tips are really for naught. So we're going to talk about how to make sure that your emails actually, hopefully, you can have the highest amount of confidence that they're getting into the inbox. Now, let's take you through sort of what is the gateway into the inbox, and that begins with authentication. So what is authentication? Essentially, this is a path, if you will, a graphic of how emails get to the inbox. You as the sender, you send out that email to the internet. It hits this thing called an inbound mail server. Think of that as like your letterbox. And it goes out and looks for essentially some authentication protocols. This is right at step 3. Now, there are 4 specific types of authentication protocols I'm going to recommend you look into to make sure that your domain is authenticated with the ISPs, the internet service providers, and that you've got the appropriate records in place on your email service provider so your emails get into the inbox, or at least have the best chance of getting into the inbox. So we'll start here with your SPF record. This stands for Sender Policy Framework. This is just a series of numbers and letters that you get from your ESP that you then put on your domain name server. So wherever you host your website, like a GoDaddy or Bluehost or HostGator, or wherever that may be. Sender Policy Framework is like the gold standard for email authentication. It essentially says like, hey, we are the business that exists at this domain, and we are signing off this email saying this is coming from our domain. So that's sort of the bare minimum record that we're going to recommend in order to provide as much authentication protocol as in place for your domain. The next one is DKIM, that's Domain Keys Identified Mail. Again, this is just a string of numbers and letters that you put on your DNS that says, yes, we are the domain and the brand that is sending from that domain. So SPF and DKIM are the bare minimum. If you are a high volume sender, in other words, you're sending probably over 100,000 emails in a single campaign, there are 2 more authentication records that I'm going to recommend. The first of which is DMARC. This stands for Domain-Based Message Authentication, Reporting, and Conformance. It is a long-winded acronym that essentially says to all of the domain providers, hey, if some email that is coming from a specific ESP doesn't look like it's coming from our brand, what do you want to do with that email campaign? Do you want us to block all of it? Do you want us to let it through? What do you want us to do with it? So it provides all of the ISPs a record of where that information can be sent so that you know if a certain amount of your emails are getting actually quarantined and where you would like to put that. So DMARC, again, is just for those high volume senders. So those that are sending more than probably about 100,000 emails in a single send. The last one is BIMI, and this is a relatively new authentication protocol. BIMI stands for Brand Indicators for Message Identification. Now, BIMI requires all of the last 3 authentication protocols that I recommend, so SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. In order to have BIMI, you must have a DMARC record and an SPF and DKIM record in place in order to create a BIMI record. Now, what does BIMI get you? Well, this is a little animated GIF, if you will, that will show you exactly what BIMI will provide. Essentially, it'll give you the ability to have a graphic, whether that's an animated GIF or whether that's an image, that's put right next to your email campaign. So you can see that one, your team at Rev, that lovely sort of animated GIF action that's happening. That's going to allow you to have and essentially say, this is our brand, and have a little brand icon, if you will, almost like a social media profile icon. And again, why is this so important? Is because we're a largely visual society. People are their eyes are going to be drawn to the inbox when they see something that looks a little bit different. It's also important on the authentication protocol side because what you're telling the ISPs is you really care about authentication because, again, these build on each other, SPF, DKIM, DMARC, and then the BIMI record. So that is one particular part of authentication and deliverability we're going to look at. The next thing that I would recommend is just make sure you're monitoring yourselves on blacklists. So there are the top 8 blacklists are essentially detailed on this slide. You've got CBL, the composite blocking list, Spamhaus, Spamcop, Invalument, Barracuda, lashback or the unsubscribe blacklist, and PSBL, the passive spam blacklist, and return path. These are the 8 majors. How do you monitor this? There are some really great tools out there. If you just Google deliverability monitoring tools or blacklist monitoring tools, you will find services that can help you understand, hey, are we on these lists? And if so, figuring out which ones you're on and working with that provider to make sure you can be pulled off of that list. So make sure you're monitoring if you are on any of these blacklists. There's a couple tools out there that can also help you from a deliverability perspective that are free. You don't have to pay anything to leverage these tools. The first of which comes from the team over at Google. This is their Postmaster Tools platform. You just have to go to gmail.com/Postmaster or Google Postmaster Tools by Gmail. What this provides is essentially a ton of additional data around 8 different data points. What's your spam rate? What's your IP reputation? What's your domain reputation? Your feedback loop, are you authenticated? Is your data encrypted, that it's coming from the ESP, and any delivery errors. And all of this information you can provide, you can essentially get about 120 days of historical information. These are all things that Gmail, and when we say Gmail, we're talking about obviously at Gmail addresses, but we're also talking about those domains that leverage the Google Workspace infrastructure for their organizations. So we're not just limiting ourselves here to just Gmail addresses, but it provides some really interesting data for you, especially if you have a significant amount of subscribers that have Gmail addresses and/or a significant amount of subscribers that are leveraging the Google Workspace tools environment. Another one for those individuals that have got a lot of subscribers that are coming from Outlook or the Microsoft 365 infrastructure is the Microsoft Smart Network Data Service, or SNDS for short. This is essentially the Postmaster tools for Outlook. It provides a ton of data for you from a deliverability perspective of what's happening with your domain within the Office 365, as well as at Outlook addresses. The last one is from the team over at Yahoo. That is the email deliverability and performance feeds dashboards from Yahoo. Why do we care about Yahoo? Because it's not just Yahoo, it is Verizon, it is hundreds of other domains that are controlled within the Yahoo infrastructure. Again, they will give you free data on a bunch of specific information about deliverability. Things like, hey, what is your sender domain reputation? Where are your campaigns actually going in the inbox? Are they dropping into spam? Are they dropping into folders? How are things happening from in terms of how engaged your subscribers are within any domain that's underneath that sort of Yahoo umbrella, which encompasses hundreds at this point. So another area where you can get free information on the deliverability of your domain. The second big part of deliverability is how the ISPs, the internet service providers, are scoring your campaigns. And the things that you've got to understand is that some of the metrics that the ISPs are leveraging, most marketers are not paying attention to. So when we talk about this engagement information, we're essentially getting to step 4 of this graphic, which is what's the subscriber reputation, or what is the reputation you as a brand have with your subscriber? Are they opening things? Are they clicking on things? Are they replying to your campaigns? Are they converting from your campaigns? And all of the ISPs, the Barracudas, the Gmails, the Yahoos, every domain in the world is essentially taking a look at what each individual subscriber is doing with your campaigns. Now, they care about certain things in terms of actions that your subscriber takes. This is a wonderful graphic from the team over at Campaign Monitor, and it essentially plots from most positive to most negative. What are the actions that your subscribers do that cause either really positive impacts on your reputation or really negative impacts on your reputation? So you'll see here, all the way on the left-hand side, the most positive action that a subscriber can take is to reply to your campaigns. And we're going to get into how to drive replies in a bit. Number 2, add to address book. So that sort of white labeling add to address book action that you do see from many brands asking subscribers to do that is a really important step and considered a positive impact on your sender reputation. Next is open and click. You'll note here that they sort of pull both the open and click action, if you will, or subscriber actions into one. They don't view either or as more positive or more negative, just that there's an action there. And we'll talk about why that is in just a second. Then there's some neutral, if you will, actions that you can do in the middle that the ISPs look at, the delete and unsubscribe. Now, for many, many years, we thought like the unsubscribe percentage or people actually unsubscribing was going to have super negative impacts on our campaigns. Yes, if they get to a certain threshold, they will. But the action of unsubscribing is not as much of a negative impact on sender reputation. The two that do have the most negative impact on sender reputation are leaving campaigns inside of an inbox unopened. In other words, you have a disengaged user or a subscriber that is not engaged in your campaigns. And the last one is mark as spam. And I think it's really important to take a look at those last two that are sitting on the right side of your screen, because leaving unopened is almost just as bad as marking it as spam. In other words, your disengaged subscribers, your subscribers that are not opening on a regular basis and then interacting with your campaigns, are doing almost as much damage to your sender reputation as those individuals that mark your campaigns as spam. So take that for what it's worth. If you're thinking, well, what should we be doing? We should be thinking about re-engagement campaigns. We should be thinking about taking the bloat off of our subscription lists of individuals who are not interacting with our campaigns. So that's number one, making sure you make it into the inbox. Number two, from a lead generation perspective, is to start thinking about the right metrics in terms of the engagement that you're having with subscribers and the impact that those specific engagements have on the metrics of your campaigns. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind here. We've had two major changes when it comes to, from a metrics perspective, on things that are happening inside of our industry that are really important to understand when we look at the metric side of how our campaigns are performing. The first of which is mail privacy protection, or MPP for short. If you're not familiar with MPP, this came from the team at Apple, which we all have to pay attention to because approximately 50% of email campaigns are being opened across Apple's ecosystem, whether that's a MacBook, an iPhone, or an iPad. MPP was introduced in September with iOS 15, and we know that about 70% of iOS users across the entire world have upgraded to iOS 15 and selected mail privacy protection. What mail privacy protection does is essentially takes all of the pre-click data that we had at our disposal, open rate and the like, away. It anonymizes all of that data. So that was one big shift that we had in the industry a few months ago. The next thing that we've had in the industry is what's called Gmail prefetching. What Gmail is trying to do is essentially serve an incredibly fast experience. And when I say Gmail, again, we're not only just talking about @Gmail addresses, we are also talking about those organizations that run their infrastructure, their email infrastructure under Google Workspace, which is a huge amount of organizations at this point. Gmail prefetching probably impacts somewhere between about 2 to 5% of your subscribers. And essentially what Gmail is doing is pulling down images, putting them on a different server so they serve as quickly as possible. Again, we lose potentially pre-open data or any open data, depending upon how many subscribers you have that may be utilizing Gmail addresses or maybe utilizing Google Workspace as their email infrastructure for their businesses. Now, what does that mean? Is that these two changes have some important implications for us. First, simply put, open rate is an ineffective and misleading metric when it comes to lead generation campaigns, okay? Because we have essentially lost a significant amount of data on open rate that we can actually truly understand that subscribers are opening those campaigns, both from iOS's MPP changes as well as Gmail prefetching. We also know that there are any number of bots that are leveraging the open and causing our ESPs to overinflate our open rate. So simply put, if you're utilizing open rate as a key metric of lead generation campaigns, it is time to start thinking about evolving potentially and leveraging other metrics. You will note here that there is an asterisk and then two asterisks because I have two specific things that I want to add to this conversation around open rate. Number one, note that I did not say that open rate is dead. It is far from dead, but just understand it is incredibly less reliable than it was in the past, and we should not be utilizing it as a measure of campaign success. What we can utilize open rate for is making it an important data point for deliverability, and in some cases, disengagement. So for those subscribers that are not within the iOS environment or the Apple ecosystem. So not on a MacBook and leveraging mail, not on an iPad and leveraging mail, not on an on an iPhone leveraging the mail app. We still have significant amounts of subscribers that fall beyond those specific inboxes. So we can still continue to use OpenRate with that cohort of subscribers. And we can still note if we're having deliverability challenges, we can kick off automations from OpenRates that are coming from that cohort. But we cannot leverage OpenRate as a measure of campaign success across the email campaigns that we are sending. It simply is just an incredibly unreliable metric for lead generation campaigns in the future. So the question becomes, okay, so what should we care about if OpenRate is not going to be a metric that we can leverage as a success metric or lack of success metric for our lead generation campaigns? What can we do? Well, first, we got to go back to this conversation and understand what the ISPs are measuring, right? You just saw this graphic a few slides ago. We've got to leverage what the ISPs care about and layer that into our campaign dashboards to understand, hey, are we performing well when it comes to the things that really have positive impacts on not only our sender reputation, but also on engagement actions around our campaigns? So we know that the reply is super positive. We know that add to address book. We know open and click. So what are things that we can potentially measure that have positive actions on our campaigns? First, let's focus on some pre-conversion metrics that matter more these days. So we know open rate, less reliable metric. What are some things we can continue to count on? First things first, click-through rate, of course. How many people are actually clicking on your campaigns? Where are they going after that? Where are they going after that click? Our bounce rate continues to be important for any number of reasons. We want to make sure we're getting rid of those hard bounces as quickly as possible and making sure that we're mitigating any changes when it comes to soft bounces. Unsubscribe rate continues to be a place where we want to make sure we're not hitting a certain threshold. And then our spam complaint rate, as you saw on that graphic, is almost the worst thing that we can be happening from a subscriber action. So monitoring for that spam complaint rate becomes really important. And we can monitor inside of our ESPs, but those tools that I mentioned, whether it's Postmaster tools, SNDS, or the Yahoo deliverability and placement feeds, all of them will also give you more important information around your spam complaint rate as well. But what's some other metrics that we could be adding? I'm going to add two more to this stack, if you will. The first of which is the email read rate or read time. This is essentially measuring how long someone has read your email. And for the industry, they term an engaged subscriber, so someone that has read your campaign, as spending about 8 seconds or more on your campaign. Yes, you heard that correctly. 8 seconds or more means a super engaged subscriber. And there are a couple different things that we can pull back to give you an idea of, or tools that I'll suggest as we get through this conversation, as to understand how engaged your subscriber is, how much time they are spending inside of the campaigns. This screenshot comes from the team at Litmus, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But essentially, the industry breaks down engagement or read time into 3 specific buckets. I mentioned read, or read, I should say at this point, past tense. That's 8+ seconds. Skim read is 2 to 8 seconds, and anything below that threshold is considered a glanced subscriber. So one of the tools that we'll talk about in a second is this one, but just wanted to give you an idea of how the industry terms an engaged subscriber, if you will. The other thing is almost all of these tools will allow you to separate into different types of device types so you can understand, hey, are people spending more time or less time with our campaigns, whether they're in a mobile or desktop environment, I should say. The other thing that I'll mention from Litmus is it gives you essentially a long tail curve of how long subscribers are spending with your campaigns. So you can see just how much time and the percentage of subscribers that are spending with your campaigns, which can be really important for like, how much content should we have in our campaigns? Should we be reducing content in our campaigns? Or do we have a really sort of sweet spot of content that people are spending a decent amount of time reading our campaigns? The second metric that I'm going to suggest, of course, remember that graphic, the one all the way on the left-hand side that had a super positive impact on sender reputation, is reply rate. Now, reply rate is exactly what it sounds like. This is the percentage of subscribers who opened your email and then replied directly to it. Yes, I am going to encourage you that you monitor this metric. And the good news is there are any number of ESPs that are already starting to do this inside of your campaign dashboards. This screenshot comes from the team over at HubSpot, but there are any number of different email service providers out there that are starting to give you essentially information on how many people directly reply to your campaigns. So let's talk about how we actually drive that reply. And we'll talk about number 3 on this series of top 5 things to do from lead gen. And that's make sure you're driving for the reply. Now, we know that reply metric, or that reply rate, if you will, is not only great for our sender reputation, but it also likely means that we have a very engaged subscriber, someone that is interested in doing business with us. So how do we go about doing that? I'm just going to show you some campaigns that I think are doing this very, very well. The first example comes from the team over at Sticker Mule. And if Sticker Mule, if you're not familiar, they essentially started their organization making stickers, but now they do a bunch of different tchotchkes. But Sticker Mule does something really interesting, a couple of things that they do that I think they're really aiming their campaigns to drive for the reply. You will note here, when you're looking at their campaigns inside of the inbox without even clicking on them and opening them, they're getting right to the point, okay? So you have their from name from Sticker Mule, you've got a really impactful subject line that has no fluff to it, and then you've got a pre-header that really starts to build on that specific subject line. Once you're inside one of these campaigns, you'll notice something really interesting about the 2 examples that I'll show for you. Number 1, they're coming from a specific person. This is coming from their, I believe, one of their co-founders, Anthony. But you'll also notice it's 100% text-based and it gets right to the point. They are essentially driving for the reply, whether it's this example from their last day for buttons campaign, or it's this one, their $9 t-shirts or shirts are back, I should say. They are specifically architecting these campaigns to be text-based and to drive for the reply, because if you do reply to these campaigns, you will get a response back from them. Next, let's show you a more B2B, if you will, example from the team over at Asana. And this is the Asana Account Rep Welcome Series. So if you're not familiar with Asana, it's a project management platform. When you upgrade your account into some of their premium or business type accounts, you essentially are assigned a real live account rep. And one of the things that they do is kick off a 4-part series that welcomes you as a paying subscriber of their platform. I'm going to dive into one of this 4-part series, but wanted to give you an overview of what these look like. The first part of that series comes from, is entitled Welcome to the Team. So you're getting this nice warm welcome. Note that they put everything in lowercase, so it feels like it's coming from an actual human being. You'll note here, this is a real life person. Lauren Zoger is actually an account rep for Asana. And all throughout this campaign content, she is driving for the reply. This reads like a human being, whether it is actually Lauren that's writing this or the marketing team that queues up these automations for them. But you'll notice here, text-based campaign, lots of opportunities to drive the click, which again, drives additional opportunities from an engagement perspective. Here's number 2. They actually do some really important work inside of this second series. They give you an idea of, hey, little education on how our product fits into the mix of things you may already be utilizing inside of your business. We slide into the 3rd step, or the 3rd part of this welcome series, if you will. Again, text-based, driving for the reply, limited images here, reads like a human being. The last one from Lauren is essentially, hey, I hope you've enjoyed this content. More opportunities for education, and she directly makes a call to action that if you would like to spend a little time having a chat about Asana, you can click on her calendar or reply right here and make an appointment with her. Again, they are driving for the reply at every single step of this journey. So that's number 3, that's driving for reply. Number 4 is to use some tools beyond your email service provider. So one of the things that I think we need to be doing, especially if we're really serious about our lead generation efforts, is not just relying on our email service provider to be the, if you will, the 0 moment of truth for everything that's happening with our campaigns. Because some of our email service providers just don't have all of the data that allows us to make really actionable or strategic recommendations around how we should be changing and adjusting campaigns. So a couple of tools that I'm going to mention. We talked about Litmus a little earlier. Let me just show you a few things that Litmus provides. First things first is you get a breakdown of total engagement. Anybody that's on HubSpot, anybody that's on a Salesforce, you do get some of this data inside of your ESP already. But essentially it breaks down into three key categories, as I mentioned before: read, skim read, and glanced. Read we know is that 8+ seconds threshold. Skim read is that 2 to 8 seconds, and anything under that threshold is glanced. Now, which of these buckets do we need to care about? It really comes down to two things for us as business owners or marketers is, okay, number one, how much content is in this campaign that we're sending? If we've got a campaign that we know only takes maybe 5 seconds to read, maybe we don't really care about that read subscriber. But if we've got a campaign that's 3,000 or 4,000 pixels long, where we've had multiple different parties add to the content, and we're seeing a huge amount of subscribers that are only glanced or skim reading, then we know that we potentially have a challenge there, that we might want to think about architecting our content in a different way or slimming it down. So just some key things that you can take from those engagement dashboards. The last one, last little screenshot that I'll share from Litmus is this detailed engagement chart. This is a really good graphic that allows you to make some strategic decisions around, well, just how much time people are spending with our campaigns. Again, if we know that it takes a certain amount of seconds to get through our content, and we're seeing a significant amount of subscribers drop off before the time that it takes to get through that content, we should probably, as a marketing team or a business owner, be thinking about, hey, do we need to slim up that content? Do we need to present it in a more actionable way or chunked up way so people can easily skim read the content and get to the content that they may care about? But again, we can utilize these detailed engagement charts to really get an understanding of, hey, how much time are people spending with our campaigns? I'll just say this before I get to a Litmus or similar, is these particular tools can help us answer some key questions, as I've mentioned. Do we have too much content? I work with organizations all the time where, we start with this really lovely email template, and then suddenly, because sales and marketing and product development and different teams, customer service have gotten involved in the conversation, we suddenly have an email that is now a few thousand pixels long. We can leverage Litmus or other tools or similar tools that are out there. And I'm happy to give recommendations of other ones that are out there to understand, hey, do we have too much content within our campaigns? Number two, how long are subscribers reading? If we know that we want to drive engaged subscribers in our campaigns, and we know that the ISPs care about that, are they spending about 8+ seconds with our campaigns and moving into that red category where we want to have as much time, or as should I say, that much percentage of our subscribers slip into those more engaged categories? Where do subscribers drop off? If we can see that long-tailed graph of detailed engagement, where within our email campaigns are they likely dropping off? Do we need to shorten things up? Do we need to potentially re-architect our design of our campaigns to figure out, hey, this is how we should structure things so people spend more time with our campaigns? And then also, how can we scale email efforts more efficiently? One of the things that you'll see from Litmus that I didn't include a screenshot here, and other tools as well, is they can help you scale your email campaigns so that you don't have to always be working with a designer and developer, but other features that are included with Litmus and other similar platforms that are out there can help answer that question as well. So the second tools or set of tools that I'm going to recommend as a way to drive your lead generation efforts are your sales enablement tools. Now, what do I mean by sales enablement tools? I mean tools that essentially provide your sales account teams, product success, customer success teams, whoever those teams are, to scale their efforts with new prospects and existing customers. This is not your email service provider. This is not your automation platform. These are tools specifically to help drive conversion actions with prospects and existing customers. There is a slew of tools out there. I have some deep experience in the three that you're seeing here, hence the recommendations. But if you look across and just Google sales enablement tools, or look across any search engine utilizing that term, you will find hundreds that are available. Lean on reviews to understand and assess which ones you may want to potentially add to your team. But the three that I'll touch on here, Outreach, Nutshell, and HubSpot Sales Hub, they allow your teams to do a specific things and essentially scale your demand generation efforts, your lead generation efforts within your sales teams. And you get to see data like this: how many meetings are being booked by your sales team or your account teams, how many prospects were contacted individually within your sales efforts. These tools can also help you do a couple of key things as an organization. Number one, it allows sales and marketing to confidently work leads across lead generation efforts. So as you're shifting things from your marketing teams into sales teams, how do we work across those two teams? Adding sales enablement tools allows a couple of things for your respective marketing and sales team. First, it'll help improve sales execution. So your sales teams don't essentially have to know, okay, if I've got all these prospects in the queue, how do I essentially scale email or contacts or phone calls or however we're touching those prospects or customers effectively? All of those tools, these sales enablement tools, will allow you to create sequences that automate and create tasks for your sales team. So as a marketing team, we can essentially put a sequence that has 2 or 3 emails and 1 or 2 calls. When a prospect is identified that's specifically for that type of sequence, they can go into that sequence, and sales doesn't even need to know that that is happening. It's all kicking off in the background. It also allows marketing and your brand teams to own the content and brand experience. So there's sometimes a lot of concerns with like giving our sales teams all of the sort of rights to how we talk to customers and show up for customers. What any one of these sales enablement tools is allows marketing teams to create templates or create specific types of pieces of content that then sales can pick and choose and send off to prospects or customers. And you don't have to worry about that it's on brand, that it's got your voice and tone, that it's got all the things that you care about as a marketing organization. Any one of these tools also reduces time wasting tasks. Just think about if you've got hundreds of prospects in the queue and you need to be able to be scaling, 3 or 4 emails over the course of a couple of weeks to your prospects. It allows you to reduce all the time that's wasted to create those tasks and get those email campaigns out. And it definitely helps accurately measure your sales effort. So on the marketing side of the house, we can very easily track opens, clicks, replies, engaged readers, right? But when we get to meetings booked, or conversations with clients, those numbers become a little soft in places, whereas sales enablement tools allow you to track those things and have data so you can have a full spectrum of metrics for how both marketing and sales is impacting your lead generation efforts. So that's number 4. Last tip that I'm going to give you, and I'm hopefully carving out enough time because I see we've had quite a few questions, which George and I very much appreciate. So we're going to save enough time to get to all of those things. But before we get to those questions, the last tip is to leverage the inbox for exclusivity. What do I mean by this? Let me just say that the relationship that you have with subscribers in their inbox is a one-to-one, very personal experience. When someone gives you their email address, they are giving you access to their inbox, a very important private space inside of their life. That value of them giving you their email address should be respected in any number of ways. But the one thing that you can do for your subscribers that can help continue to reward them and give net new subscribers a reason to subscribe and be a part of your lead generation efforts is to ensure that what they get in the inbox is the most exclusive content, thing, or widget that you're giving away. Too often we see a lot of brands essentially do the same promotion, the same thing, the same widget, the same white paper across all of their marketing channels. In other words, they distribute it everywhere. I'm going to recommend to you that if you want to do any number of things, which I'll break down in just a second, and reward your subscribers, both short-term and long-term, in a way that provides the ability for you to say, this is why you should be a subscriber of our campaigns, that those things that those subscribers care about most, do so in the inbox, or at least do them exclusively in the inbox, or do it first inside of the inbox. Why is this so important? Number one, it gives any new subscribers a significant incentive to be a subscriber. If someone that's a fan of your business, if someone that's doing research on your organization knows that they're only going to get the really juicy tidbits, the things that they care about in their inbox, there is a reason to subscribe. So it engages those new subscribers right off the bat. Number two, it rewards your long-term subscribers. If you're essentially splitting your subscribers and customers' attention across all your social media channels and their inboxes, you're not giving them a place to pay attention to your brand and the inbox can be a place that They are very attentive audience. So make sure that you're rewarding those long-term subscribers by having that exclusive content inside of the inbox. And if you can't do that, at least doing it first inside of the inbox. It also reduces churn. So having people churn inside and out of your subscription database, they're coming in and they're coming out because they don't have a reason to stay there. By having exclusive content or things or whatever you're sharing as an organization, maybe it's promotions, maybe it's deals, maybe it's exclusive news, maybe it's first access to XYZ. It helps reduce that churn of potentially people that are coming in and then decide to cycle right out because they're not seeing value in being a subscriber. So that's it. Quick thanks before we turn over to questions to the team over at Marketing Profs for having me, and also to VIB for also being our sponsor today. Again, you're going to get a feedback survey. We would greatly appreciate your insights, and the slides and reporting are going to be provided after today's session. So I am more than happy, George, if you want to come back on and we can chat specific questions, or we can just go through this chat box and answer them. What would you like to do, my friend?
Yeah, no, I've got them listed out for us, brother. Listen, if you had a handheld mic, I'd tell you to drop that bad boy right now because it was on fire. But let's go ahead and not waste any time and get into the audience questions. So Cindy asks, how do you get into the Gmail main box and not promotions?
I mean, this is like the tale of old times, if you will. The first thing you should know is that the vast majority of subscribers are still utilizing a chronological inbox display. So when we look at the data, it suggests to us that this is not as important as a question for us as marketers as it is for normal human beings, because marketers are not normal human beings. Let's just be honest with ourselves. Is you should know that the vast majority of Gmail users are not utilizing tabs. They are utilizing either the Mail app on iOS or Gmail, the native icon inside of Android, and essentially getting all of their email in a chronological order. So that's first. Second, there is no way you can guarantee placement inside of the core inbox or priority inbox, if you will. But what you can do is you can encourage users to do a drag from the promotions into their priority inbox in your welcome campaigns. You can encourage them to do the add to address book, which also helps funnel campaigns there. But there's no surefire way, whatever anybody will tell you, that will say if you do these 5 steps, you will end up in the actual inbox tab versus in promotions. But also understand, for those subscribers that do have, or those Gmail users that do have tabs turned on, we know from any number of data resources that it's something like 60% of Gmail users who have tabs turned on, 60% or more, check it at least once per week. 47% or more check it multiple times per day. So even if your campaigns are going there, that doesn't mean that they're being ignored. But again, this gets to the question of what's our from name, what's our subject line, what's that pre-header, so that if you do end up in that promotions tab, what's going to actually get a subscriber's attention? Having your BIMI record in place, so you have that little icon and you can control the brand experience around that icon, and making sure that that from name, you build a relationship with that from name, and that your subject line and your pre-header support each other, so it gives your subscribers a reason to open.
Ramamurthy asks, does adding URLs company website reduce the rate on which the emails go into the end customer's inbox? So are URLs bad or not? I guess is what they're asking.
Yeah, URLs definitely not bad at all. No. And if we're not answering that question, or there was that you were looking for some other answer there, just pop that into the chat box so we can answer that a bit more thoroughly. We may not have caught that entire question.
Yep. Will asks, does BIMI only work with Gmail?
No, BIMI is now supported by almost all the major inbox providers. That being said, you do have to get a DigiCert certificate for your BIMI record to show up in Gmail, and that's not free. I believe it's somewhere between about $800 to $1,000 a year, if I recall, or 3 years. I can't remember what the renewal period is. But BIMI is supported almost across all the major platforms, from Outlook all the way through Yahoo and the like.
Nice. Ian asks, do these authentication tools / protocols matter if we're using an email marketing platform such as HubSpot, or would HubSpot be taking care of all of this on their end?
So this is a great question. This really comes down to whether you're on a shared or what's called a shared or dedicated IP. If you're on any one of the ESPs, most of us are utilizing a shared IP experience, meaning that there are 1, 10, 100, 1,000 brands utilizing the same essential virtual server box, if you will, sending campaigns. When we're on a shared IP, we can only have so many protocols. For MailChimp, that's DKIM. For HubSpot, they allow you to have your SPF record. They allow you to have a couple other ones, depending upon what kind of account you have. So look and find out, hey, if we can sign our emails, we should be doing that, because then we're building reputation on our domain. For others, there is no ability to do that. And there are some ESPs out there that are very popular, I'm not going to name names, that don't allow you to do these things. Now, if you're on a dedicated IP address, then you must be leveraging your own your domain's own authentication protocols, because HubSpot, et al., like, etc., are not signing they're not signing your campaigns when it's coming from a dedicated IP address.
Awesome. Michael, you got another 5 minutes?
I do, yep.
Let's keep the party going, people. All right. Rebecca asks, what are the repercussions of having a no reply email address account? I work for a hospital and we can't really handle health questions or complaints being emailed to the marketing team.
Yes, this is one that I've harped on for many, many years, and I have seen this change over the years. So I will tell you that a no reply specifically tells your recipients they can't really reply. Now, I would actively encourage that even if you're under some sort of HIPAA compliance, or you're under some sort of like FINRA compliance, if you're in the financial services field, is that you're identifying a team that can take those inbound messages, or at the very least, you have a reply series that comes back to that user that says, hey, if you have a question or need to talk to someone, this is the place that you go. That doesn't violate any HIPAA or FINRA or financial or regulated industry standard for you to just have an auto reply that says, we're really not allowed to answer questions here, but if you do have questions, this is where you go. You go to our website, you go to this email address, or you go to a 1-800 number, whatever that may be. But I would highly encourage you to not have a no reply, because it illicitly says to your subscriber that there's no communication that's happening here.
Nice. I love this next question. I actually was thinking it as you were showing like the examples of the three kind of across each other. Is clicking on a hyperlink considered a reply?
It's not. No. So a reply is actually hitting that reply button and it going to a monitored inbox, versus the click is just giving you that click-through rate, or adding to your click-through rate, I should say.
Gotcha. Abby asks, what's the best way to determine how many seconds it takes to read your content? And then she prefaces, for the sender, my provider doesn't show this information.
So front end, there are tools that you can essentially drop your copy into, and it will tell you what the average insert country here reader, the time it takes to get through that content. That'll give you an idea of how much time you should be seeing from the engagement side once you've delivered the campaigns and people are reading them. If your ESP doesn't give you that information, there is Litmus, there is Email on Acid, there are other tools out there that you can essentially add on for limited expense, that will give you access to that information and those metrics, from read to skim read to glance, and then sort of those detailed engagement metric charts.
So I think you might have just answered this question, but I'm not the email ninja you are. So I'm still going to ask the question. And that is, K Chico asks, which ESPs offer read through or read through time metrics again? Did you just list those off?
I did. I mentioned a couple of them that I'm aware of, and I know that there are others out there. HubSpot very much does. You also have MailChimp. You do have to pay a small fee to add this onto your MailChimp account. The other one that does this is the Salesforce Marketing Cloud. Marketo will do this through an integration with Litmus, depending upon the account that you've got. And there's any number of others that do have this information included. If you don't see it in your campaign dashboard, the likelihood of it being there, probably slim to none, and you've got to add it to your sort of like on the side and be reporting about it outside of your ESP.
Gotcha. Is it safe to assume that functional explanatory images will hold a viewer longer to the 8-second ideal than a block of text? Do images, though, impact email delivery rates / issues?
So, there's a couple of things to unpack here. Images themselves, unless they are exponentially large, have fairly limited impacts on deliverability. But then we get into a whole accessibility conversation when it comes to images. So if your email is 100% images and someone doesn't have images turned on, which is a significant amount of inboxes that automatically do not turn images on, number one, they're not going to see any campaign content. So they're going to see essentially a square with nothing in it, if you will. So having 100% image-based email, or an email that is all encompassing of images or a series of images, becomes a challenge on the accessibility side. When it comes to attention and what your subscribers prefer, this is a test you're going to have to run. In B2B, we typically see, and I know this is largely a B2B audience, we typically see more engagement and more replies from text-based campaigns. So if your business cares about engaged subscribers, driving leads into the inbox for your salespeople, we have to be thinking about ways that we can elicit that reaction. Text-based campaigns, less images, making it feel like a human being is going to encourage those sorts of actions. Whereas more image-based emails are going to feel promotional in and of themselves. And therefore, psychologically, consumers, normal human beings, are going to treat them differently. They're going to automatically think that it's a promotion. They're going to automatically assume that this is something that's trying to get their attention, and they may just decide to move on.
Love it. Love it. Thank you, Michael, for an amazing presentation. Again, that's been fire over in the chat pane.